Hello and welcome to the first and what will likely be the only, what are we calling this, a tactics session, coaches session?
Something to do with...
I'm not a coach, you're a coach.
With nerds. Something to do with nerds.
You can't see our faces, but this is Joe Patrick, managing editor at Dirty South Soccer. I'm here with Josh Bagriansky, who, what do we call you?
The nerd. The Dirty South nerd.
Yeah, he does great tactics work for us, great tactics pieces almost every week, unless something crazy comes up. He's pretty reliable with it. So I highly encourage everybody, before we even get started, to go read his piece on Dirty South Soccer this week, previewing this game. We're going to talk a little bit about what we think we're going to see. And so first of all, when we talk about tactics, I think that we kind of, we don't see the forest for the trees, I think, sometimes. I think sometimes things get lost. We think about too many generalizations. We don't think about what is the purpose of soccer tactics. One of my favorite books, do I have it around here? I don't, it's probably in my room somewhere, is a book by Jonathan Wilson called Inverting the Pyramid. It talks all about the evolution of soccer tactics. I encourage anyone who's interested in this kind of stuff to go read it. But he talks about basically the general purpose of tactics is to be as fluid and attacking and threatening as you can with the ball while maintaining defensive solidity. So if you can combine those two things, you're nailing soccer tactics. And coaches approach it a different way. And one thing that really struck me this week was talking to Kevin Kratz. He talked about how Tata Martino goes about devising a tactic, a game plan, a strategy much differently than any other coach he's played with before. He said that most coaches, the first thing they'll look at is how to neutralize the opponent's threats, and that's, reasonably so. You want to keep that defensive solidity, and then they'll think about how they can exploit the opponent on the counter with the ball. But he said the way that Tata Martino works is that he does it the opposite. He looks at first where he can exploit the opponent, and then he builds his team around how to keep his defensive solidity while maintaining those attacking principles. So I think it's very interesting. I think we're going to see that in this game. Two very contrasting styles, two contrasting ways to approach the game tactically, with Gio Savarese for Portland Timbers and Tata Martino for Atlanta United. But I think that's going to create a very interesting game.
I think the fact that the way the teams play is so different. Portland is a team that's very comfortable playing without the ball, and they look to it's almost the opposite of what you just said with Tata Martino. They focus on their defense first to create attack. So the way that, but they're not a boring team. They're not a bunkering team that sit back behind the defense. So you're going to see Atlanta United on the ball a lot, and Portland looking to exploit Atlanta United when they get forward in possession. So again, contrasting styles, but both, I think, creative, fun to watch style. There's a reason the Timbers, despite being a more quote-unquote defensive side, were, I think, 6th in the league in goals scored this year. So it's definitely going to be two different, diametrically opposed styles from the two managers, Savarese and Martino, but I think it's going to make for a good match as opposed to those two styles canceling each other out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. So why don't we get into lineups, eh?
Let's do it.
Let's start with Atlanta United, because it's pretty simple what Atlanta United's going to do, or at least how they're going to start this game, personnel-wise, structure-wise.
Are you sure it's not Houston Dynamo there in the orange?
It's King Peach, everybody. It's King Peach.
That's King Peach.
This is what we could afford with the Dirty South Soccer budget for $1.49 at Publix. They're little stickers that we just didn't take the stickers off of. But yeah, this is it. It's a 3 at the back with 2 wing backs, and you've got your 3 central midfielders here. That is Eric Rometti, number 11. And yeah, and basically you have your 2 attackers here. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about this later, but this has been, I think, one of the keys to Atlanta United's success this postseason so far, is only playing with 2 attackers, which sounds crazy, but then adding that 3rd central midfielder. I'm kind of playing as Julian Gressel, even though he never seems to lose his spot in the lineup. Actually, none of these guys really have lost their spot in the lineup since they've been healthy, and I think that's why we're seeing all 3 of them, is because finally now we have Rometti, and Nagbe's healthy, and Gressel's healthy, everybody's healthy, and we're seeing that this is the full-strength squad for Atlanta United, so I don't think we're going to deviate from this, unless things go awry. So,
so if they're what do you think would one option be if Tata Martino changes up the 11? I'd imagine that would be Tito Villalba coming underneath for Joseph Martinez, and then you would drop Almiron back into the midfield for who? Gressel or Nagby? It will be decisions to be made. You could go for Gressel, and you can move Gressel over here to the right wing-back position where Escobar is. So if there's any change in the 11, I think it'll be based on Almiron dropping back into the midfield, which is where he played in the 3-5-2 all season long. And, you mentioned these three here, Joe, Gressel, Remedi, and Nagby, and how solid those three have been. A big part of this solidity has also been Franco Escobar has been great all postseason. You've gotten Greg Garza back healthy, and you've got that kind of solid back five with the base of three in front of them. I think what's different about this match is you're not playing two legs. So you might see Tata Martino come out a little bit more aggressive, whether that means putting Villalba here in the middle, whether that means putting Gressel over here for that right wing back for Escobar, which could mean Escobar on the bench, or it comes in right there in that place for Jeff Laurentowicz at right center back. So if there's any deviation from this 11 that has worked very well in the playoffs, I think it'll be an aggressive attacking move that involves Tito Villalba coming into the first 11. But I tend to agree with you, Joe. If it ain't broke, don't change it, right? And this has been a very good lineup in the playoffs, and it's one that can easily turn into a 5-3-2, a little more defensive with these two back, Garza and Escobar, or a 3-5-2 as we have them positioned, a little more aggressive on the flanks.
Yeah, right. And I will say that Tata Martino has admitted he's a manager that does not like to change his lineups from week to week, especially when they're working well. But I do agree with you that in this situation, I think that part of the reason that this formation has been so successful for Atlanta United this postseason is because they've been playing teams where they've been playing in a high pressure. I don't mean pressure as in nerves. I mean pressure as in a lot of activity in midfield. You want that extra body, that third man along with the back three to keep you solid. And in this game, they're not going to be playing in a game like that, most likely. In this game, they're going to have a lot of the ball and need to be wary about counterattacks. So why would you add another attacker? Well, that might help you if you're dropping Miguel Almiron into this position. Maybe that gives you a little bit more quality in the kind of ball circulation areas. We'll show it later, but he'll be positioned in these areas, passing in and around the box, as opposed to a guy like Julian Gressel, who's not maybe has the most technique in those types of situations. Which is why I could possibly see Gressel playing out here in this game at right wing back. But yeah, there's lots of options for Tata Martino in this game, but I think this is the most likely thing we'll see.
It's definitely the most likely, and I think what we're kind of going over, I would expect those are adjustments that he can make in match.
Absolutely.
But I thought you brought up a good point, Joe, is that, and I wrote this in the Dirty South article you just alluded to, this game is fundamentally different in that from the NYCFC and Red Bulls ties, not just because it's one leg, but because those two teams, the way they play, they want to take control of the game. They want to take Atlanta United off the ball and implement their style. Portland are very comfortable with Atlanta United playing 4 in the back, 5 in the back, 3 in the back. They don't really care. They're going to sit back defensively, as we'll go over in a moment, and then look to hit you on the counter. So Tata Martino can pretty much do whatever he wants as long as his players do kind of what Kevin Kratz was talking about and stay aware of their defensive responsibilities when they're in attack.
Yeah, so let's talk about what we think Portland's going to bring to the game. So the thing about Portland is obviously, and this has been the story, this is not a surprise, shocking news here, but they've got Diego Valeri here, who's obviously just do all. Yeah, and it can strike at any given moment.
2017 MVP. Yeah.
Yep. Kind of same with Sebastian Blanco. We saw him with the wonder goal in Kansas City, and then this guy's important. Ebobisse. That's how you say his name. Ebobisse. What's his first name? Do you know?
Jeremy.
Jeremy?
Jeremy. Yeah.
Jeremy.
It's much easier. Okay. I tell you, I was spell checking my piece on Portland, and it was absolute hell.
I always thought it was Ebobisse, but apparently it's just Ebobisse. But I can never get that right. Anyway, he's going to be super important because he has a special job in this game, which is to really give Portland an outlet because they're going to play deep, right? So when you play as deep as Portland is likely to play in this game, you need a way out. You need a route to get the ball out from time to time to allow yourself to kind of reset, push back up the field. And create some attacks for yourself, obviously, of course, and through his energy, running into the. Let's just set up the teams because I think it'll make a lot more sense if we do this. If we just kind of put everybody into
when the ball is in play, yeah.
This is probably something we'll see we're basically just pushing everybody up into their third because this is kind of more of what we're expecting.
Mm-hmm.
So Abobasi, his role is going to be getting in behind Eric Remedi in this defensive midfield spot and push the ball into these areas. Because when he gets into those areas, they can play out, and then he can bring in, once Atlanta's retreating, that's when spaces and gaps start to open up in Atlanta's defense. So he's going to be very important for them. But what we're likely to see, and Matt Doyle, I heard him kind of talked about this earlier this week, is they're going to defend like this. They're going to be a back flat four, and it's either going to be a fifth man in midfield, or it's going to be they could go with the back three and play more of like a 5-4-1. It'll probably be a 4-5-1 though, I think. But they're going to play deep, which is something that Atlanta hasn't seen this postseason.
Yeah, I think it's very safe to assume you're going to see Portland in the 4-2-3-1 formation. Savarese really settled on that towards the end of the regular season. They've played it exclusively throughout the playoffs, with the exception of the second leg against Seattle when they played 5 in the back. But they were defending a lead from the first leg in that, so I think the tactics were a little bit different. The 4-2-3-1 is what you can always expect, and I think the main reason is these two right here. You're holding midfielders, Diego Chara, maybe the best in MLS at what he does, next to David Guzman. And what those guys allow, basically, is when Atlanta gets forward into these situations, these two are so good at protecting the back four that Valeri, who's not a defensive player, and to some extent Blanco, I think you're right, Joe, we'll see Blanco and Polo, here number 11, drop back and defend. But to some extent, if these two can protect the back four effectively, you're going to see Blanco move away from the ball as maybe Escobar gets forward and try to get into this space out left and attack. So that's going to be a big part of what Portland are doing, and it's all based on these two, because their back four, as we've seen throughout the season, Clarice Mabiala here, 33, Liam Ridgewell, number 24, the former Birmingham City legend. We're expecting Villafana, U.S. international at left back. Right back is the only position where there might be some question. You have Zarek Valentin that started there in the last match. These four have been okay, but these two protecting them are what allow Portland to play without the ball in their half and be comfortable with these Atlanta United players getting forward into the attack. And what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to win the ball back with Atlanta getting committed forward. And when that happens, you're going to look for one of two things. You're going to look for either, say, Escobar's checked up here.
He typically does it.
And he typically does, right? So if Atlanta's pushing forward... I mean,
this is how they get their width.
Exactly. If Atlanta is in this... And we expect Portland to almost invite them into this position. These two do the job. You'll actually see Polo come back and play a little more defense. Very good tackler. These two are going to have free roll. So Blanco's going to look, if they can win the ball, they're going to look to distribute him here. And then Valeri's going to move all over to try and start the counterattack. One thing Portland are very good at are passing in between the lines, here or here, for instance, and turn and counter. The one other thing they can do is what you just mentioned with Ebobisse, is if he plays up here, he can get into those spaces like you said, Joe. But another thing that he can do, and he's really good with his back to goal, is look to lay the ball off to Valeri or Blanco coming here or here. So Portland are very comfortable, I think, sitting back in this, whether it's a 4-4-1 like we have here, or whether it's Blanco kind of roaming and Valeri with a free roll underneath. But they're very comfortable playing without the ball because of these two, Guzman and Chara, who can win the ball back and then have the quality to distribute, most likely one of these two, to start the counterattack.
And let me tell you what worries me about Atlanta United from an Atlanta United perspective, where I think that they could be exploited here, is in this position. We just talked about how these three guys are going to be kind of their most, this is going to be their attacking trio right here. And most likely, since Blanco is playing on the left, they're going to be coming up this side. And this is where I don't want to be
Jeff Laurentowicz we're pointing at.
I mean, I don't want to be too harsh here because Laurentowicz has been a rock. He's been so solid for Atlanta United this season. But when he's playing up near the midfield line and the ball turns over and he's got fast players trying to get in behind him, I don't think that that's the best situation for him to be in. I think that, he's honestly better as a center back in those games like against NYCFC, like against New York Red Bulls, where he can be reading the game, step up, play aggressive from a deeper role and use more of he's able to use more of his intelligence here, as to where I think that in this kind of game, you would typically like a player more of the profile of a Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez over here to kind of defend this, defend that attack that Portland's going to present, because he's just a little bit faster, better running back, better, more precise tackler. So I think that that's an area to watch out for in this game.
That's kind of a mirror image of what we saw when Atlanta United went to Audi Field earlier in the season, and Jeff Renowitz found himself matched up with Lucho Acosta 1v1 in a lot of situations, and he really took advantage of, like you said, Joe, his lack of pace. You're absolutely right, especially if we see Franco Escobar or Julian Gressel, but I think probably for the reason you just mentioned, Joe, that's why you don't play Gressel here. You need a defender to kind of get back and not Gressel to help with Blanco. But that's exactly why Portland want to play without the ball, because they want Escobar to get here, and that allows you to get Blanco isolated with a player like Jeff Renowitz. So you're so right, and it's going to be really fascinating to watch the two styles of plays kind of clash. And for Atlanta United, it's just going to be about, it's not going to be super tactical or strategy. It's just going to be about having the quality to break this defense down. And for Portland, it's going to be about staying resolute, and this is certain and going forward and countering. And this is certainly, I think, one of the main areas where they can exploit Atlanta United is get Laurentowicz isolated with Blanco any way that you can.
And it's just going to be difficult because with Portland, I mean, these two guys, Chara and Guzman, I mean, they're two of the best defensive midfield pairings in MLS. I mean, these guys are super smart. They're not just technically good defensively. They're very smart. They play off each other very well. And they're just well organized, and they're going to be tough to break down. I mean, we saw that in Atlanta's first game. I mean, it doesn't matter how many guys you throw forward if they aren't being manipulated, if they can't be tricked kind of in movement from Atlanta United, then you're gonna have a tough time. You're gonna probably try to get lucky. That's kind of how Atlanta scored. Honestly, Gressel kind of off I think it was like off a rebound or something.
Yeah,
like
a
bouncing ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great goal. Don't get me wrong, but not like it wasn't like a pretty goal that was opened up by an incisive pass.
Right, absolutely. And I think it'll be very interesting. I mean, that's going to be the battle. One more important thing about Portland, I think, is you look at it on its head. You see it's a team with 47% possession. They still able to score a lot of goals, but so you assume they're just a straight counter-attacking team. They want to hit it over the top, beat you for pace, kind of like just what we showed with possibly Blanco getting isolated on Laurentowicz. But a really interesting part about Portland is that they're one of the league leaders in passes completed in their own half during the season. So they do like to knock the ball around in this area here. And it's, again, you just brought up those two guys, and we're talking about them so much, Guzman and Chara. They're both really good on the ball as well. So they're very comfortable passing the ball back and forth here, and maybe getting Atlanta United to overcommit. They can move forward a little bit, let's say, into this area here, form a triangle with Andy Polo, and say Remedi checks up, and they're going to look basically for a ball in between the lines, and then they go. But it's not necessarily going to be, say, Guzman wins it back here, and he goes straight to Valeri. They might try to knock the ball around. They might try to use the left back this way, and kind of probe, and then look for the right ball to probably one of these two, Valeri or Blanco, who really have freedom to move around here in the midfield and find those spaces. And
these players have very good chemistry with Valeri, especially. To find the pockets, to find these passing lanes between these players, and to arrange so that when the ball gets to one of these two defensive midfielders, just to find those spaces to get the ball into Valeri in space where then he can turn and run. And when Valeri's running an open field with the ball, it's the most dangerous thing in MLS. I mean, the guy's unreal. He probably has more quality with the ball at his feet, I would say, than anyone on Atlanta United's team. I think
I would agree with you.
He doesn't have the physical skills that a guy like Miguel Almiron has, but I think that just what he can do with the ball, I think he's...
Well, there's a reason he's one of the best players in MLS at, 35, 36, whatever it is.
I think he's only 32.
Okay, so he's not as old as I thought he was.
I don't know. I could be wrong about that.
But either way, you're not effective the way he is at that age without being a very technical, skilled player with the ball at your feet. So you're absolutely right. And then, of course, you have Blanco here, who's very good with the ball at his feet, but has a little bit more pace, can run at you. So it's two different types of players you have to prepare for coming at you if you're an Atlanta United defender.
Yeah. So, it's hard to say tactically, from Atlanta United's perspective, exactly how you're going to break this down, because like we said, it's just going to be such a deep block that You just have to... I think what it's going to be about for Atlanta United is being precise enough in possession to force this, to force these wingers very far back, and to even force Valeri to get involved back here. If it's just Ebabisse up top, I think you're okay with that.
Especially with 3 center backs.
Yeah, with 3 center backs and a guy like Remedi back here, to clean things up. I'm sure he'll have an eye on Valeri all game. And we should point out, Remedi did an amazing job locking down Maxi Morales against New York City NYCFC, especially in the home leg. He almost man-marked him for the whole game. I mean, anytime he was basically within the boundaries of the box, Remedi was all over him. And so I would be interested to see if they try to do something like that when Atlanta United doesn't have the ball. But it's going to be about trying to force Portland into such a deep block that they can't quite get out on the counter as quickly as they want to.
And that makes Remedi so crucial because, and this is something he's done so well this playoffs, and it's something we didn't know he was going to do particularly well, is he has to be very tactically sound. He can't get caught pressing into these places here because he can't allow that ball to Ebabisse or say to Diego Valera if he's up top. So that's going to be a big part of, if these guys get forced behind the ball, a big part of not letting them out is going to be Remedi staying in position because he can cut out this pass to Ebabisse, or he can stop a Valeri or a Blanco trying to attack out of the back. One thing, though, also, Joe, where I think Atlanta United can break Portland down, aside from just possessing the ball well and things like that, I think it's in these areas here, in the flanks. If you watch the Sporting Kansas City game, Johnny Russell had a field day on the left side on the right side of the pitch, attacking Omar Villafana. I think if you can get, because Portland want to play really compact, they want to stay in the middle here. If you can get into these spaces and you can pull Villafana out of position, and we've seen Nagby or Gressel do this all playoffs, check over and help the fullback. Joseph Martinez comes in, and then all of a sudden you've opened up space right here in the middle of the pitch. So that, and of course that can happen on the left side with Greg Garza as well. Another thing that really interests me is Miguel Almiron drifting to the left, which is kind of, and I know I don't have Portland's shape exactly right here, but let's say Portland get forward on one of those counters, right? So they're high up the pitch. Polo moves up too. So let's say Portland are out on a counter or what have you. They have the ball. Miguel Almiron has loved to drift, and I'm getting it set up here. You can edit that out if you want, Joe. Enjoy. Miguel Almiron loves to drift to the left side of the pitch, right? So sorry, that's going to be over here.
Left is over here.
With Greg Garza. So if Portland get forward, right, and let's say they lose the ball in this position, you can hit Garza here or Almiron, and you can create a 2v1 with we're assuming Valentin is the right back. When you get into this position, that's going to pull Mabiala over. It's going to force Char to come, and you've got an opportunity for Joseph Martinez to get in behind. And of course, you can do that on either side of the pitch, but since Almiron prefers to drift to his left, you'd expect him to be on this side. And you brought this up at the very beginning, Joe. If Gressel starts that right center mid possession instead of left center mid, then he can come over and perform that same sort of function.
That interplay with
Escobar. Exactly. So I think they're going to be tough to break down, but this is where the space is. And if you can get a 2v1 here with the outside back, or you can find a way to beat him 1v1, it's going to pull that compact block of midfield block of 4 and back 4 of defenders. It's going to pull them out of position and put them under pressure a little bit. So I think that's really the only way, aside from just quality of getting in behind, where you can kind of tactically set up to try and move them around, is to try and get into those wide areas and create mismatches. And
I think that is where the weakness for Portland is. You talk about, how do you beat a low block? Well, it's like you say, it's getting the ball into the wide areas, and when you do that, you're flattening out. You're stretching the team in a different way. You're stretching them so that they have to kind of come into these kinds of positions, and then you create more space for yourself. So that's what's going to happen. And I thought that Atlanta United, to be perfectly honest, in the game they had in the regular season, I thought that they actually did that pretty well. Portland was still able to break on them from time to time, but I mean, Atlanta United did dominate most of that game, to be perfectly honest. It was just a matter of not being able to exploit those spaces. And I can't even remember which players we had available to us.
And that game is important in that Portland really didn't show any attacking onus. They were not 100% as far as who was available. I think Guzman was actually with Costa Rica at the World Cup at that time. I can't remember. And they came out with a back five, and they didn't even really try to get forward aggressively in the ways that we've kind of displayed. So that was a different type of match where Atlanta was genuinely playing a bunkering defensive team, and that's not going to be the case for Portland on Saturday.
Yeah, and I also think that, regarding Julian Gressel, I think we talked about the interplay that he could have with Escobar, and I really just like him. I'll be very interested to see if he's playing on the right or the left side of central midfield, because in this postseason he's been playing on the left. He's been playing. I understand why. You're turning his body a little bit more naturally in field. You're trying to get him more, that can just help you be a little bit more combative, and then you can also pop up in good positions with a chance to shoot on goal, which he does have a good long-range shot. But I like him out in this position. I like him in the right central mid position if he's going to play central midfield, so that he can kind of drift into these areas. And we know that he has amazing service into the box, probably better than Escobar's. And if you're dominating the ball and you want Escobar to create width, you don't necessarily want him putting the final ball in, because he's just not as good at providing service as a guy like Julian Gressel. So I think if you can get into situations where you're pushing Escobar up and he's forcing this, you have a nice little drop to Julian Gressel if he's playing on the right side, to put in that cross from deep where Joseph loves that back post run. And
another possibility there is, if you're dominating possession enough, Escobar can come inside and Gressel can overlap him. Interestingly, this is something we've seen Garza and Almiron do a lot. And that might just be because Miggy can cover space. I mean, it's unbelievable. Gressel, it's going to be a little more difficult for him to make that run. But if you're controlling the possession enough, I think you'll see Franco Escobar check in, and you'll look to sneak Gressel down this side of the pitch here. And, Joe, all of this is basically little wrinkles Atlanta United can play with to be aggressive while maintaining defensive solidity.
Right.
And I think there's been a real misinterpretation of Atlanta United's tactics over the playoffs. I'm hearing a lot of people say it's a bunkering side now that looks to counter, and I think it couldn't be further from the truth. They were very aggressive. Even though they played the quote-unquote five in the back, they were very aggressive against Red Bulls and NYCFC at home. The shape was just a little bit different, and it's more tactical over two legs. I didn't really, aside from the first leg in New York City, I think Atlanta United, it might be five in the back, but this is how Tata Martino wants it to look. You want your fullbacks way up the pitch. You want Gressel getting over and combining, like we just mentioned. You want Almiron drifting left or getting in through the middle. So you're going to see, in my opinion, Tata Martino look to be a little more aggressive than he was on the road in the playoffs. And I think a lot of media members, whoever you want to call out, maybe are a little bit too swayed by the defensive tactics that we saw at times previously in the postseason. I expect this to be what the game is going to look like most of the way.
And that's why I wanted us to do this little video, this little feature, is because I do think that sometimes things get oversimplified when we talk about tactics.
Definitely.
And you talk about a team playing a 5-3-2, oh, well, that's defensive, But like you said, it's tactical. Especially in a two-leg series, it's going to be more tactical. Especially if, like in the Red Bull series, they had a result. It's like you wouldn't, if you took a 3-0 lead at halftime, you wouldn't go balls to the wall in the second half. You would just sit and protect the lead and get out of there without having to suffer too much.
And that's why Atlanta has been successful, is they've been able to strike that balance all postseason long so much better than their opposition.
So I think we've covered most of what we'll generally see from the in the main phases of play. But I think we should probably start to talk about what might happen as the game progresses in different situations. So let's talk about what would happen if you're Tata Martino, it's the 60th minute. It's still 0-0. Do you make a change? When do you bring on this man, Tito Villalba? He's almost certainly going to be the first sub into the game. Even if they're winning, to be honest, I think that you'll probably see him come on.
It's fascinating, right? Because if Villalba comes on, you move someone that you're never going to take. You're never going to take Miguel Almiron off the pitch.
Of course.
So if you bring Tito on, you're moving Almiron back into the midfield for most likely one of these three coming off. Now, and one other thing you could do, though, is either take Franco Escobar off or take Laurentowicz off, move Escobar back there, and you move Gressel to the right. So I think as far as aggressive moves that Tata Martino can make, it's certainly going to have something to do with this man, Tito Villalba. Might have something to do with Ezequiel Barco, we'll mention in a second.
We'll talk about him.
But I'm really intrigued to see, assuming Gressel starts in the middle, if that's one of Tata Martino's attacking moves in the second half, is to move him to the right wing-back position and provide that world-class service he's provided all year.
I think Laurentowicz is the one who makes way. If this is the case, if they need a goal, I think Tata Martino will not hesitate to take out a center back. He's got a center back to replace him already on the field.
And actually, a center back who's a better matchup with Sebastian Blanco, which we talked about earlier, if he gets high and gets 1v1.
Yeah, so if you're in those situations towards the end of games where you're really pushing forward, at least you've got athleticism in these areas to track back if need be. And, you know, he is a bit crazy, this one, Franco Escobar. He's he's fun to watch, that's for sure. We've seen him play in this right center back role where he's actually overlapping the right wing back,
he's a wild
trying
one.
to do crazy stuff. So it is a wild card here. I do like him playing in this situation, though. I like him as a right center back, just generally speaking. But yeah, I think that's the move we see, and then basically you're just going to play with, you know, Tito's going to basically play up as a striker. You're going to try to get this situation. You're going to try to get these guys matched up in one-on-ones. It's going to be very tough in this situation if it's 0-0 because, like we've talked about, they're just going to be so deep. They're going to be covering all these passing lanes. But when you bring Tito on, it's going to force them back even more. It's going to compress them a lot more.
And the difference between Tito and Almiron is it becomes a true, more or less, two players up top. Whereas we just talked about Almiron, it might be underneath Joseph, but he might drift over left with Garza. He might try to come back and get the ball and attack. With these two, you're going to have two guys occupying the center backs, and these two, Chara and Guzman, at all times. So what that can change is, just say Joseph Martinez makes a run, Garza has the ball here, and Joseph Martinez makes a run here, and Mabiala has to find him, and Chara has to check here, and all of a sudden you've got Guzman covering all the space in front of the back four. Yeah, well, for Almiron or Nagbe or whoever to come into. So when you put two up top, it might look easy when you look at the defense and go, oh, well, that's no problem. You've got man-on-man here. But the movement of these two, you can't let Tito Villalba make this run here if your left back is committed. It's a run he loves to make as well. Yeah, if your left back is committed and not follow him. You just can't. And then you have Joseph has all the free. So that's going to create space. Their movement is going to be so fundamentally different from Almiron and Joseph to Tito and Joseph. Excuse me. It's going to be so different that it's going to create a different challenge for the Timbers, and for a team that is comfortable playing without the ball. I think that's going to be a critical adjustment for them to make, if they have to make it. Is going to be when Atlanta United goes to two out-and-out strikers, how do you handle their movement and not allow their movement to create space here in the final third?
Yeah, agree. And now let's talk about Barco for a second. I think Barco's a guy.
Fascinating substitute to me.
Yeah, in this game in particular, I think. Because Barco, what we've seen from him is maybe not what we expected to see, or what we thought he was as a player. I was adamant that he was a winger that wanted to take players on one-on-one. And I don't think that's what he is. I think he actually sets up well for Atlanta United in this game as a ball circulator, as a guy who can come in and, again, do things that help force the opposition back. I know a lot of fans want to see more from him. They want to see him take more chances. They want to see him play more aggressively with the ball. They want to, they paid $15 million for him. They want to see the man. They want to see the man score some goals or make some assists or do something like that. But really, he's almost seems like a Nagbe type. At least this year, this iteration of Ezequiel Barco, is that he's a guy who can get out of a tight space and move the ball along and shuttle it. So if he has to enter the game, that would be another decision. I don't even know who you would put him in for at this point. It's so hard to say. There's so many hypothetical situations. I think you would probably see him come in for I think you probably go to a back four at some point if you're really chasing the game.
Yeah.
You probably just take out Franco and just go this and just add another midfielder.
If you're chasing the game, then I think you see Barco play as an extremely advanced one of those as a quote unquote wing back who's really playing as an attacking midfielder. But it's if we go back to the original scenario where it's 0-0, I think you probably don't see Barco until later in the match. But one thing that you can do, and you just mentioned his ability as a ball circulator, is you can basically go with Barco either instead of Tito here, which I don't think we'll see, but you could also see Almiron, if you want to really get attacking, is you could put Barco, because he's a good...
They're hard to pick up.
To pick up the sticker. See Barco in this position as your attacking midfielder. I mean, and he's not going to give you a ton defensively, but he can play that position no problem. And Almiron drop back and become more of a number 8, which could mean Nagby comes off. But the crazy thing about Ezequiel Barco is it's the same thing with Tito, is that in this shape, realistically, if he comes on, you're either moving Almiron back or you're taking Joseph off and you're moving Tito up here and playing Barco as more underneath player. So I think you're more likely to see Barco if you're leading. He holds the ball up well.
Agree.
He wins fouls. He wins set pieces. So I think it's more likely that if you're leading late, you go with Barco. And this is a risk, but you take Joseph off. I'm talking like 85th minute.
Yeah, we're winning already.
And then you have the pace of Tito on the last fresh legs. Tito, who would have come off the bench on the last defender.
Yeah.
So you can use Barco in a few ways, but I do think, like you said, Joe, his ability to circulate the ball, hold it, makes him a very valuable substitute off the bench late in a match, whether you want to push the defense back or whether you want to maintain possession and kind of kill some clock. So it'll be interesting to see how Barco is used. And certainly you mentioned the other way, Joe, is you just say you bring him on for Greg Garza. Say you're really, really gonna go ham and really attack and say, all right, our left wing back is now nothing defensive about him.
You're basically asking Leandro Gonzalez-Perez at that point to just be his cover man, just to be in this area.
Barco's sub is going to depend how, Tito we kind of know. He's going to come in, he's going to provide fresh legs here, you can counter with him. But Barco can be employed in a bunch of different positions, and where he ends up will likely be determined by the game state at that time.
Right.
I think it's unlikely we see him here, but if you're down 2 goals, you want to play a back 3 and play Barco here, Gressel here, and go forth, and that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, I would be shocked to see Miguel Almiron not play 90 minutes in this game. I think whether you're leading or defending a lead, I think that he's almost equally valuable to you in either way. And I would kind of say the same about Remedi. I don't see him. He's too important to the team. His role to not play 90 minutes, and I think same with Parkhurst and LGP. So. But that's the good thing about Tata Martino's, the team he's built here, is that, there are lots of options that he could go to off the bench. There are so many ways he can manipulate the structure of the team, the personnel on the field, and that alone can throw an opposition team for a loop of not knowing how to adjust to those adjustments that Tata Martino makes in game.
And as we've mentioned, I mean, a guy like Barco you can use in so many different ways. It's tough, even though you might know what Atlanta's shape going to be. You don't know exactly how they're going to attack you, like you just said, Joe. Portland, you know what they're doing. Atlanta, they can use these wing backs in so many different ways. They can use their substitutes in so many different ways. They can use Almiron deeper. He drifts to the wings. So they're a much more flexible, multifaceted attack and tough to deal with. And certainly Barco and Tito make it even more difficult when you have 2 players coming off the bench that would probably start for any other side in the league.
Yeah. I think we've covered this pretty well. What else do you have?
Well, I think defensively, if Atlanta United are leading in the match, we went over Barco. I think you might see Tito maybe up top for Joseph. But the one player we haven't mentioned is Miles Robinson. And you could do a lot of different things with him. I mean,
he's a player that Tata Martino has actually really liked in these post-game situations, or in these late game situations. He's typically come on as a third center back. So I don't know. I think he is a player. If Atlanta United has a lead late in the game, I think he's coming on. I think Tata Martino likes, especially what he brings. If Portland is throwing on attackers towards the end of the game, which is what tends to happen. We saw this in Dallas, actually, which is a game that they blew 2 goals. But or maybe it wasn't Dallas, but
when Miles Robinson came on,
lots of other teams. Yeah, I mean, he did come on in that game, but lots of teams will just throw on forwards at the end of games, and sometimes you just need to throw on an extra center back to be able to defend corners, defend set pieces. Just to be an extra guy. So I think that if Tata Martino, maybe he's made his trademark Tito and Barco subs, I think we might see Miles Robinson as that third sub, just to lock things down. I'm not sure exactly, who he would come in for. Maybe an Escobar. I'm not sure. I'm not sure who he would come in for. Actually, Escobar would probably just keep on playing his right wing back role, but he's definitely he's become a solid option for Tata Martino.
One thing you can do is say Laurentowicz is still playing. Is you bring him in and you push Laurentowicz. Say you take off Nagby, you push Laurentowicz into the midfield, and then you have a much more defensive holding midfield pairing with Laurentowicz and Remedi. So that's one possibility. And then I think the other defensive substitution possibility is just a like-for-like switch here with Chris McCann coming in for Greg Garza. Chris McCann, a little more of a traditional defender that's not going to try to get as far forward. So I think that's another possibility. Is you just see a kind of left-back for left-back sub over here with Chris McCann coming in for Greg Garza.
Yep. I don't know what else to talk about in this game. What is your key to this game? Like if the game is going to hinge on any tactical nuance or tactical, if any sort of strategy or anything worry you or give you a lot of hope?
I don't know that it would really worry me, but I think once again, Franco Escobar's side of the pitch is going to be absolutely critical. So yeah, if we go back to
get the starting lineup,
the initial shape here. So we kind of just went over this, but we saw Franco Escobar just have a field day down this side, and I think since we know Atlanta United are going to have the ball, he's going to be high up the pitch. We know that. I mean, there's absolutely no question about that. So I think the key matchup is really these two here. I think you're going to see Blanco and Escobar matched up 1v1 a lot, particularly with talk about things I'm worried with Portland getting forward. So that's what really worries me, and not so much on this side, although Andy Polo is a good player. But what I worry about is Franco Escobar getting committed forward, and you end up in that exact situation you mentioned earlier with Blanco getting the ball in space on the left. To me, that's the key. And if Atlanta United can keep Blanco off the ball and Escobar be effective, then we end up in those situations we just talked about where you can create a 2v1 and exploit space here in the wide area. So to me, wide areas are key, and it's going to be these two guys, Blanco and Franco Escobar. Whoever controls the play on that side more, are going to really be determinant on who has success.
Yeah, I mean, that's it for me. It's actually, I would go a little bit further back and focus on Jeff Laurentowicz. I think that
right. Yeah.
The job that he does in this game is going to be pivotal, and just I hope that his athleticism is enough. In these situations, I do not want to see Sebastian Blanco matched up one-on-one against him running a goal. I think Blanco is actually a more intriguing player to keep an eye on in this game than Valeri.
I agree.
Even though Valeri is probably a better player in general, and he may do things, I think just from a tactical perspective, Sebastian Blanco's positioning and the way he moves about the pitch is going to tell a lot about how this game goes. Could be the other way. If he gets stuck back here, that's very good for Atlanta, But if he's getting into these positions, like you said, behind Escobar into these areas, matched up against the center back, that spells trouble for Atlanta. That's an area where they can be exploited.
It's funny, we've talked about Blanco so much more than Valeri, who's probably the more renowned of the two players. But you're playing 3 to 5 center backs, so Valeri essentially is going to have a tough time. Now, if he can get on the ball down here, then you're in trouble. But I don't see him having a huge effect on the game in the center of the park. I think it's going to be much more Sebastian Blanco. And one other thing I would say is, don't pay attention to what you see the Portland shape listed as when they come out. So we were looking at some previous games, Joe, and we saw Valeri underneath some games. We saw Blanco here underneath some matches. Pretty much if you look at where they end up, it's always Valeri playing up underneath Immobile, and Blanco just, he can cover a lot more ground. So he's just free roll down this left side. He can drift inside and help here.
It's almost like a Ram Deuter roll.
Yeah, exactly. For the football manager.
Just trying to find the spaces, though.
Yeah, the football manager dorks out there. And Andy Polo, who I haven't mentioned a lot, he can play centrally as well. So
one might call him a Carolero.
Okay, exactly. You're on fire tonight, Joe. Doing great. But these three...
Josh just rolled his eyes off camera.
These three have complete freedom. Well, not more so these two have complete freedom. And that's what Portland is. You have essentially 8 field players who are playing a defined role. These 4 aren't going to do anything crazy. The outside backs aren't going to go ham going forward, although Villafana does like to get down that way and combine with Blanco when he can. The 2 center defensive mids, nothing like Remedi and Nagbe, who we just showed you earlier, are going to push up the pitch. They're going to stay back and sit. Polo is a player that's going to be pretty...
He's a straight line guy.
He's a straight line guy, and we've seen him play way back here at times, protecting the right back quite a bit.
He gives them a little bit of versatility on this side because he can tuck into these areas and get into these passing lanes, and he's kind of a more defensive. He has more defensive instincts.
Exactly.
I guess I would say than
and that's why you're going to see a lot of the time Blanco drift this way, Valeri's going to drift right, and Polo's going to look to distribute to him. But basically and then Immobile is your straight back to goal striker, doesn't do anything crazy. So you have 8 players in your goalkeeper, assigned roles, asked to play disciplined at all times, and then you have 2 players, Valeri and Blanco, who are going to move all over the place and create a lot of problems in terms of being able to track them for the Atlanta United defense.
I'll tell you, the more I think about this game, the more confident I'm getting about Atlanta United's chances.
Yeah.
Because I think about all the things that have to go exactly right for Portland to kind of create much, and I think about Atlanta's basically a lot less has to go right for them. I mean, the game is going to just be set up more for Atlanta to create, and even though Atlanta dominated the game against Portland in the regular season, at least just when we're looking at how they played on the ball,
they played their speed, their tempo for sure. I think if you look deeper at that game, the chances were more even than Atlanta.
That is actually true,
but if you're going to get 65% possession, whatever it was, from that match again, you got to like your chances.
Yeah. And I guess the more I think about this game, I just feel like Portland needs to have everything go right for them, and probably also get some breaks, just because they can't a draw is not good enough for them here. They can't. There is no draw, unless you go to penalties and win. But they need to actually get a full result here, a win, and that's just difficult. We've only seen Red Bulls, Sporting Kansas City. I'm trying to think,
and there were red cards in both of those matches.
Yep, and VAR goals. So, I'm liking how it's looking for Atlanta United.
You have to, and I think there's people act like when you're a great attacking team that the solution is always just to sit back and defend, and as if that makes things tougher on the attacking team. I don't think that's necessarily true. Atlanta's going to be super happy that that they can play a game where basically these players are back and you can just knock the ball around and possess and play. Do we have our third center back?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So Atlanta United, they're a good attacking team with a lot of quality. Quality is required to break down this sort of low block, and it's hard to bet against them. I mean, there's a reason they've gotten this far. It's very difficult to sit back and defend against a team as good as Atlanta United. It's very, it might say, okay, well, you got 2 guys on Joseph Martinez. He's one of the best players at moving off the ball on the league. And we've seen Atlanta United break down many a bunker this season, and that's why I feel good about it, because Portland is going to let Atlanta United play the way they want. And I think historically we've seen Atlanta United have a lot of success when teams have allowed them to do that, as opposed to Red Bulls, who you just mentioned, who are going to high press. They're going to try to get Atlanta United off the ball, with the exception of the first leg where Chris Armas... We should do a whole nother tactical Chris Armas leg one thing. We can do that later.
Off-season content.
But that's why I feel good about it, man, because how can you not be confident in your attacking players at this stage in the season? You've gotten this far, and you're playing a team that's going to let you attack and get forward. So even if Atlanta United's not exploiting these wide areas, you know you're going to create chances with players of that quality if you're on the ball a lot.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, a lot has to go right for Portland, and that includes Atlanta United probably missing on some chances.
Yeah, for sure. And we talk about the low block, and I don't. Sometimes you'll hear pundits talk about a low block as if it's like an impossible thing to penetrate, and it's like, oh, well, then you're totally set on defense if you play this way. But these players still need to remain active and engaged during the full course of the 90 minutes. And when you have players as athletic and dynamic as Joseph Martinez and Miguel Almiron, they're going to give Liam Ridgewell fits. Like, Liam Ridgewell, I interviewed him today. He's
getting a yellow card.
He's a big guy.
Sure,
yeah, he's definitely getting a yellow card. He's like he's hilariously like quintessentially like hard man British, like just like the way he talks and everything. But I really think I like the profile of Joseph Martinez going against him. I think it suits him well. You know, if we relied on like a bigger target striker up top, I think that suits a guy like Ridgewell a little bit better. I think he's going to have more trouble trying to track these runs. I think Joseph is actually going to try to match himself up against Ridgewell specifically to try and maneuver around him.
And that's the thing. I mean, you're asking for one. If you're going to sit back like this, if one of these two, Mabiala or Ridgewell, doesn't track Joseph just one time or makes one mistake on the ball, that's a problem. So people act like bunkering against an attacking side is really easy. It's very, very difficult.
And it can create a lot of running. And it actually you'd see the effects of that later in the game because, like you said, when you're just keeping possession, when the ball's bouncing around here, there's constant closings down. You know, these guys are constantly moving. You have to when you're playing that deep, because you have to keep some sort of pressure on the ball. You can't just let the ball go unpressured into these danger areas around the box. When that happens, that's when you give up. You just leak goals, and that's what bad teams do that. Portland doesn't do that, but it's going to affect them the longer this game goes, if they're just out of possession the entire time. It's just going to be very difficult for them. So unless they can actually create on the break, I really think they need a goal early in this game. They need something to hang on to, in my opinion.
It's tough for Portland because if you do fall behind, I'd imagine to see them stick to this system for maybe the remainder of the first half. They get up an early goal. But if you have to start attacking, and these guys have to, well, Valerio's be up there, but you got to keep Blanco high. You got to keep Polo high. You're going to push Chara and Guzman a little bit more. And all of a sudden, I mean, we talked about these two, Almiron and Joseph.
Yes.
I mean, just
this is where they have a field day.
Look where all the space is. So if Atlanta United can score first, at some point Portland has to come out of their. I don't want to call it a shell, but at some point they have to look to get the ball forward and not just allow Atlanta United time and space on the ball. When they do that, these two eat.
Yes.
All day.
Yep. So yeah, it's going to be difficult for them. I'm looking forward to the game. I can't say it again. I can't say it enough how tactically interesting this game is, because I was talking to Jason Longshore about this earlier tonight. I talked to him earlier, and I do think this game sets up for both these teams in the ways that they ideally want to play. I think that
Absolutely.
Portland wants to play on the counter. That's the way that they find themselves to be the most effective. And Atlanta United wants to be on the ball. That's the way they find themselves most effective. So in a way, you're seeing both these teams looking at this game like it lines up with their strengths, with what they want to do in the game. But in the end, I just think that Atlanta United, it will be so much pressure on Portland for like the entire game. It's just going to be extremely difficult for them to keep, especially just to keep a clean sheet. But yeah, I would be pretty sure they need to take advantage on set pieces. I would actually go so far as to say is, if they don't score a set piece goal in this game, they're not going to win.
Yeah, and of course we're not going to use the board to show you set pieces because we don't. I mean, that's a bit much for us. But Portland, I believe, was third in the league in set piece goals scored. They created a bunch of chances on set pieces when they came to Atlanta. But to go back to your original point, Joe, that both teams are pleased they can play the way they want. That means you've got the first seed or the second. God, I'll always call Atlanta United the first seed in the East. I can't believe that happened on the last day. But you've got the team with the second most points in MLS, the team that was fifth in the West. So you've got to think if both teams play the way they want, you've got to give the heavy edge to the team that finished on 69 points in Atlanta United. And, I mean, we can go over Atlanta sports curse and all that, but we're here to talk about the practical side of this and the tactics. And I think the simple fact that Portland is going to allow Atlanta to play the way they want to play, Atlanta will say, sure, you can play the way you want to play too. We got better results playing our way during the season. So it's tough for Portland, and I tend to agree. I think set pieces or finding something on the break is really their only way through. And if you give up that first goal, it's a lot harder to create those spaces on the break because Atlanta United are going to be naturally a little bit more conservative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a wrap. I think at least that's what I've said. I think I've said all I could say about this game.
Portland off the bench, I mean, we've got a few. I mean, the only real one I think you can maybe plan it on is maybe seeing Asprilla off the bench, really, really fast wing player.
That's just a blank one.
Maybe, Asprilla maybe coming in for Polo. He scored a huge goal against Seattle in Seattle. He's a pacey player. Again, he's the type of guy that if Garza gets caught high up the pitch, there might be some problems. He's the type of guy that maybe if it's late in the game and he comes on, you want to bring in Chris McCann to kind of rough him up a little bit down that side. Maybe.
No, I don't want to see that.
I know Joe doesn't want to see Chris McCann, but that's one guy to look for. And then aside from that, I mean, they're not a super deep team. Lucas Milano is an attacking player. I think he's scored like 3 or 4 goals in his career for Portland, although he's a very talented South American player. Here we see Lucas Milano.
The thing about Portland getting into this situation is if this is probably only happening if they're down a goal, if they need a goal. And it's so hard for me to imagine Atlanta United not feasting in this situation. Like you said, if Portland is pushing players forward, now they're getting out of their comfort zone. And now they're playing a game that they don't want to be playing. And I just think you're gonna see these guys be pushed more forward,
and they don't want that. They do not want to end up with a high line, and that's certainly going to happen. And also, I would add that whether it be a Asprilla coming off the bench or Milano, that is not the same as bringing on Tito Villalba or Ezequiel Barco. I mean, these are guys that are no disrespect to them, but they're a clear level below the guys in the first 11. So Asprilla is not going to necessarily bring something to the match that Tito Villalba would. That would really create problems for Atlanta tactically, matchup-wise, things like that.
Yeah.
Just don't go to penalties. Win or lose, just no penalties.
They have been practicing them. The players have said they've actually been practicing their penalties this year, which is good.
Give me your 5 right now before we go.
Okay.
Let's.
Do I have to put them in order?
Yes, in order.
In order.
And we'll see if we really know. Knows his analytics. We'll see.
Oh, is there an analytical answer to this? Ooh, okay.
Which is not always the correct answer, but
I think I wouldn't want Joseph going first. I'm gonna say I would want.
Line them up so we can.
Okay.
Yeah, make it look nice.
I want Gressel going first.
I love it. Gressel, of course, went first.
Confident player.
Yeah, love it. I think we agree on that one.
Second, I think I want to see. Well, is Tito on the field? I think Tito's on the field.
I think Tito is absolutely on the field.
I want him going second. I want Miggy going third. I want Joseph going fourth. And I want future captain
Perez going last. Now, what an interesting one.
Oh, wait. Well, Barco's got to be in here, doesn't he?
Barco's on
He's a good penalty taker. Barco taking the last game-winning penalty.
Can you imagine? And then Perez
LGB
probably
could be
right
fifth
after
or
that.
sixth.
I think I would switch these two.
Yeah, that might be a good call.
And that's just me personally. I mean, because for me, I love it. Gressel first. We know that he came up empty last year against Zach Steffen. Oh, that was a great save, though, in that penalty shootout. I totally agree, Joe. I don't think that's bothered him one bit. He also strikes the ball with a lot of power, technique. It's going to be on frame. Tough guy to face first. For me, personally, I like to put my best guys second and fourth.
Okay.
And the guy that goes first, you just want to have the attitude that he's not afraid to go first. Ezequiel Barco, we all know about the penalty he made in the Copa Sudamericana. I expected him to take a lot of penalties for Atlanta United, but he hasn't. So I like him going number 2. Almiron, who I actually don't think is a great penalty taker. This is hopefully a good place for him if you get off to a good start with these two.
That's why I put him 3rd. I feel like I would want my worst penalty taker actually going 3rd.
Yeah, agree. Absolutely agree. And well,
worst of the guys we're going to be taking.
I'm just trying to think. If you replace Almiron, there's really no... this is...
I wonder if Remedi's a decent penalty
taker.
I don't know. Nobody knows.
So you wonder about Almiron, but surely he's going to be in the 5. Joseph's your best penalty taker. For me, you always put him 4th. It's a big spot, and he's pretty much guaranteed to take a penalty. I think a lot of people make the mistake of putting their best taker 5th, and it often doesn't even get to that situation. And then I think Tito is a natural decision for number 5. But just please don't let it get to that. My heart cannot handle it.
I wouldn't want Joseph going first because he's got that unique run-up. Mm-hmm. I think that it makes it more difficult for
after you've seen a couple guys.
Yes, to take a normal one, then he does his weird thing.
Absolutely.
So,
and hey, I hope he doesn't go to penalties, but you got to love the idea of having these 5 technically sound guys that can strike the ball with pace and power, no problem. Obviously, there are so many things you can't prepare for on penalties, fatigue, pressure, things like that. But this is I really like that 5 right there.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we can get out of here.
Yeah,
I think we've.
I could go on if you want. I'll go on and on. But yeah, I think it's covered it.
I think we've done well. For Mom, if you're still watching, follow the Dirty South Soccer YouTube channel.
You too, my mom. Same thing. She's like, I'm so confused.
Actually, my parents could not care less about what I do. But anyway, yeah.
Same. Same.
Thank you, everybody, if you stuck with us for this long. Appreciate you kind of going through this. This was kind of meant to be like a podcast style, just with like this board being as a visual aid. So hopefully you haven't actually been like staring at your computer screen watching it the entire time, because that might be a little boring, but give us your feedback. Let us know how you consume this. I'd be interested to know kind of what you thought of this, if you prefer this to be the last time we ever think about doing something like this, or if you maybe would want to see something like this again. We would not do it for every game, but maybe for big matches or something like that, we could pull this board back out.
Definitely.
All right, guys. Comment, subscribe, smash the stuff, and we will talk to you guys later. All right.
How long do we go?
I don't know. I've got 22% battery, so we did good.
Tactic talk will flow.
It was an hour and 2 minutes. That's good. That's fine.
Should we split it up?
No, it's fine.
Are you going to put like text?
I was going to. I was
labeling what we're talking about.
I was going to do that, and now I'm not going to.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
I'm too tired.
I can.
And lazy.
If you send me the file, I can at least go like we do for Mott's. Will be like 15 minutes. We discussed this. 20 minutes.
Oh, okay.
And then put it on the DSS or on. It'll go on in the comments so people just know.
So people can cut.
At least know what's coming. Yeah.
I kind of stopped going off our script. I didn't even realize.
We knew that was going to happen. We covered everything.
Yeah, I figured we did.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. That took an hour?
Yeah.
Shit.
Can you move the mouse there? Can you move the mouse on that and just hit, hopefully it's still recording. Yeah, sometimes it. And just hit, can you hit stop?
Yellow.
Yeah.